The weekend I agreed to help Leah's younger sister pack up her apartment was the same weekend I finally felt like my life was starting to make sense again. My name is Theo Hartwell. I'm 38 years old. I live in a rented townhouse in Kitchener, Ontario, and about 2 years ago my marriage ended in the quietest, most devastating way imaginable, not with a blowout fight, not with lawyers screaming across a table, but with my wife sitting across from me at our kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, telling me she hadn't been happy for a long time. She said it gently. That was the worst part. She said it the way you'd tell someone their favorite restaurant had closed down. Matter of fact. Resigned, like she'd already grieved it alone and was just catching me up. Her name was Leah. Leah Hartwell, née Galloway, and even now, saying née Galloway, still catches somewhere in my chest, because once upon a time, the fact that she'd taken my name felt like the most permanent thing in the world. We met at a Canada Day party in Waterloo when we were both 26. She had this laugh, loud and slightly unladylike, she always said, and I fell for it before I even knew her name. We were married 2 years later. For a while, maybe the first 5 or 6 years, we were genuinely good together. We hiked the Bruce Trail in pieces, one long weekend at a time. We had a dog named Biscuit who we both loved more than was probably healthy. We argued about small things and let the big things slide, which I know now was the problem, but back then it felt like harmony. The last 2 years of our marriage were, I don't know how to describe them except to say they were beige. Everything was functional, and nothing was alive. We stopped reaching for each other, not dramatically, just gradually, the way daylight gets shorter in October. You don't notice it day to day, and then one evening you realize it's dark at 5 o'clock and you can't remember the last time you watched a sunset. When Leah asked for the divorce, I didn't fight it. I think some part of me was relieved, and hating myself for feeling relieved made everything worse. We split the assets cleanly. I kept Biscuit because Leah was moving into a smaller place and she said it wouldn't be fair to him. I've always suspected she also just thought I needed him more than she did. She was probably right. Leah had a younger sister named Ren Galloway, 29, sharp and funny and perpetually scattered in the way that only people with genuinely creative brains tend to be. She made documentary shorts, mostly about environmental stuff, and she lived in a rental apartment in Hamilton that she'd been meaning to leave for years. Ren and I had always gotten along. During the marriage, she'd been around a lot. Sunday dinners, Christmas at their parents' place in Guelph, the occasional movie when Leah was working late. We had the same taste in bad science fiction films and the same strong opinions about Tim Hortons versus any local coffee shop, which is to say we both thought Tim Hortons was a trap, and we both went there anyway out of nostalgia and convenience. After the divorce, I assumed that relationship, Ren and I being easy around each other, would just quietly expire. That's how it goes, right? You split from someone, their family files itself away under people from before. I didn't reach out to Ren. She didn't reach out to me. It seemed like the natural thing. Then, about 8 months ago, she texted me. I remember where I was when it came in, sitting in the parking lot of a Sobeys, having just bought a rotisserie chicken and a bag of baby carrots, the saddest bachelor dinner of all time. My phone buzzed and there was her name on the screen, and for a second I just stared at it. Hey Theo, hope this isn't weird. I'm finally moving out of the Hamilton place, taking a job in Waterloo actually, and I'm basically drowning in boxes. Would you be willing to help? I know it's a lot to ask. Totally fine if not. I sat in that parking lot for a good 5 minutes. I thought about Leah. I thought about whether this was appropriate. I thought about all the reasons to just say, sorry, can't do it, good luck with the move. And then I thought about the fact that Ren was someone I genuinely liked, that she was going to be in Waterloo, which was 20 minutes from my place, and that she'd asked me because she trusted me and maybe didn't have a lot of people to call. I texted back, I'm in, tell me when. The Saturday of the move was overcast the way Hamilton gets in March, that flat gray-white sky that feels like a ceiling pressing down. I drove out in my truck with a case of water and 2 large coffees, because you don't show up to help someone move without coffee, and Ren buzzed me up to the 4th floor. Her apartment was chaos. I mean genuine creative person chaos. Books stacked in ways that defied physics, film equipment piled against one wall, a corkboard covered in index cards and string that I assumed was either a story outline or evidence of a break-in. There were boxes that were sealed and labeled, and boxes that were still open, with random objects sitting in them like she'd packed in the middle of a thought, and then wandered off. I see you've been very organized, I said. She spun around from where she was taping a box and pointed at me. I've been very busy. There's a difference. We worked all morning. It was, I don't know how else to say this, easy. Comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. We carried boxes and disassembled her IKEA bed frame, and argued about the best strategy for getting her couch around the corner of the fourth-floor hallway, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, I forgot to feel weird about being there. At one point I was moving a stack of boxes in her bedroom closet to get to a shelf she needed disassembled, and I shifted a bin and a shoebox fell off the top. The lid came off when it hit the floor, and postcards slid out across the hardwood. I started picking them up automatically. They were old, the kind with photos on the front, the saturated colors of the 70s and 80s. Banff, Niagara Falls, Cape Breton, Tofino, a dozen of them, maybe more. And on the back of each one, handwriting I didn't recognize. I couldn't read them. I wasn't trying to, but I caught a few words on the one closest to me. Missing you. Can't stop thinking. A different name each time, but always the same handwriting on the sending side. I put them back in the box without saying anything. But it stayed with me. Ren had grown up mostly in Guelph. Why did she have a collection of postcards sent from all over the country? Who sent them? Who were they for? I almost asked. I didn't. We got most of her things into the truck by early afternoon. She bought me lunch at a diner near her building. I had the club sandwich. She had the breakfast wrap she always ordered because she said breakfast food at lunch was a form of freedom, and we sat there in a booth by the window with the gray light coming through the glass. Can I ask you something, she said, picking at the edge of her paper placemat. Sure. Are you doing okay? Like, genuinely. Not the version you tell people. I looked at her for a second. I don't know, I said. Better than I was. Some days I feel like myself again. Other days I get halfway through a Tuesday and realize I haven't spoken to another person since Sunday. She nodded slowly. Leah's good, by the way, if you want to know. I know she is, I said. I hope she is. She's seeing someone. I looked down at my coffee cup. I'd known, in the vague peripheral way you know things you haven't confirmed. Good, I said. Meant it mostly. It doesn't bother you. It bothers me in the way that a scar still tightens sometimes, I said. Not pain, exactly. Just the reminder that it was there. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You deserved better than how things went, Theo. I know I'm biased because she's my sister. But I was there for a lot of it, and I just think you deserved more. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, Thanks, Ren. She looked out the window. Okay, she said, like she was closing a door on something. Let's go finish moving me. We got her things into her new place. A one-bedroom in a low-rise on the east side of Waterloo, close enough to the research park that she could walk to the office. By 4 o'clock, we were arranging boxes in her living room, figuring out where the couch should go when my phone rang. It was a number I recognized even though I hadn't seen it on my screen in over a year. Leah, I stepped into the narrow hallway between the living room and the kitchen and answered it. Hey, I said. Hey, a pause. Are you at Ren's new place right now? Something shifted in my chest, a small cold thing. Yeah, I helped her move today. Another pause, longer this time. She didn't tell me you were doing that. Is that a problem? She stopped. Started again. Don't you think that's a bit strange, Theo? You helping my sister move? I leaned against the wall. I think she needed help and she asked me. That's about as complicated as it got. She has other friends. Leah, what? We've been divorced for 2 years, I said. You've moved on. I've moved on. Ren and I were friends and she's not your property, and I'm not either. I'm not doing anything wrong here. The silence on the other end was the kind that has weight to it. I could hear her breathing. I'm not saying you're doing something wrong, she said finally. I'm just saying it's weird. I understand that it feels weird, I said, but I don't think you get to decide what I do with my Saturdays anymore. She hung up. Not angry. Exactly. Leah never really did angry. That wasn't her register, but clicked, controlled. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Biscuit, who I'd brought along because he hated being left home, appeared from the living room and sat beside my foot. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. When I went back into the living room, Ren was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the parking lot. That was Leah, I said. She turned around. I figured. Did you know she'd be upset about this? Ren looked at me steadily. I knew she might be. Why didn't you say something? Because, she said carefully, you're allowed to exist, Theo. You're allowed to have people in your life. And I needed help, and you were the person I wanted to ask. I nodded slowly. There was something in the way she said it, you were the person I wanted to ask, that I filed away without fully examining. We didn't talk about Leah again. We put together her bed frame, and I hung a curtain rod in her bedroom, and at some point she made tea and we sat on her not yet positioned couch in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes, and talked about nothing important for a while. Hockey. She didn't follow it, I only half followed it. A documentary series she was pitching. A hiking trail out near Elora that we both said we should check out sometime. It was getting close to 8 when I started gathering my things to leave. Biscuit was asleep on Ren's hoodie, which he'd found on the floor and claimed as his own, because that is simply who Biscuit is. Ren walked me to the door. We did the thing where you're standing in a doorway and neither of you quite moves to end the conversation. Thank you, she said. Really? I mean it, anytime. She smiled, and then the smile shifted into something else, something more careful, more deliberate. She looked down for a second, then back up at me, and when she met my eyes there was something there I hadn't seen before, or maybe hadn't let myself see. Can I say something? She said. Yeah, she took a breath. I used to think, a long time ago, before you and Leah were even serious, I used to think you were exactly the kind of person I would want. The way you showed up for people. The way you listened. The way you'd carry every box without making someone feel like they owed you. She paused. I never said anything, obviously. You were with Leah and I love my sister, so I just put it away. The hallway felt very still. Ren, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I know this is a lot. I know the timing is, the timing is terrible. I just thought, you've been carrying things quietly for 2 years, and I have too, and maybe it was time to just say it, even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if you walk out this door and we never talk about it again. I looked at her. She looked back at me. In the corner of the room, Biscuit snored quietly on her hoodie. I thought about the postcards scattered across her floor. I thought about you were the person I wanted to ask. I thought about sitting in that Sobeys parking lot 8 months ago, staring at her name on my phone screen, and deciding that being someone's person when they needed help was still worth something. I need some time, I said, to think. Not because the answer is no, but because I want to give it the honest thought it deserves, and I can't do that stand in a doorway after a 12-hour moving day. She exhaled, a long, quiet breath. Okay, can I call you this week? Yes. I picked up Biscuit's leash. He woke up, looked offended about it, and then resigned himself to the situation the way only labs can. Ren, I said. Yeah. For what it's worth, you were never just Leah's sister to me, either. I drove home through the dark, the highway lights blurring past, Biscuit with his chin on my thigh the way he always rides. I didn't turn on music. I just drove, and thought, and let the city gradually become the quieter streets of Kitchener, and tried to figure out how much of the last 2 years I'd been surviving and how much I'd actually been living. That phone call from Leah kept coming back to me. Not because it hurt, it didn't exactly, but because of what it clarified. She had moved on, she had someone new, she was allowed all of that completely, without any claim from me. But somewhere in that phone call was the assumption that I was still operating within the boundaries of a marriage that no longer existed, that I owed her a kind of loyalty that had been dissolved by mutual agreement 2 years ago. I thought about what I'd said to her, you don't get to decide what I do with my Saturdays anymore, and I was glad I'd said it, not because it was cruel, but because it was true, and sometimes the truest things are the ones that go unspoken the longest. I thought about Ren standing in that doorway, the careful way she'd said what she said, not as a demand, not even really as a question, just as the truth of a thing she'd been carrying, offered without expectation. That took more courage than most things I'd seen in a long time. I got home, fed Biscuit, and stood at the kitchen window with a glass of water, looking out at the neighbor's backyard where their kids had left a hockey net out in the slush. March in Kitchener. Everything half melted and uncertain, not quite winter anymore, not yet anything else. I thought, I've been waiting for something to feel possible again. 3 days later, twice before she picked up. Hey, she said, careful, measured. Hey, I said, so, I've been thinking. A pause, and I think, I said that honesty is probably the most underrated thing. And that timing is always going to be complicated when your history is complicated, and that, I don't want to walk past something real just because it's inconvenient. The silence on her end stretched out just long enough that I started to wonder if I'd said the wrong thing. And then she laughed. Quietly at first, and then more openly, and there was something in the sound of it that I recognized. The same laugh I'd heard across Sunday dinner tables and bad movies and 1,000 ordinary moments that I hadn't known were storing themselves up inside me. Okay, she said. Okay, she said again. Let's be careful. Let's be honest with each other. Let's, I don't know, get dinner sometime and figure out who we are outside of all the context. I know a place in Waterloo, I said. Good fish tacos, not a chain. She laughed again. That's a very specific thing to lead with. I'm a specific kind of person. Yeah, she said, you really are. I stood there in my kitchen, biscuit leaning against my leg, the March slush turning slowly into something that might eventually become spring. And for the first time in a long time, not triumphantly, not dramatically, just quietly and with some measure of actual certainty, I felt like I was standing in the right place at the right time, making the right call. Not every story has a clean ending, but sometimes the next chapter starts with a phone call and a dinner you haven't had yet, and that's enough to keep going.